The New Balance 550s are a pretty strange shoe. There's a lot of weird aspects to the shoe, and I'm really curious to cut them in half, and that's exactly what we're gonna do, because people are worried that New Balance is sold out, and they're worried that this shoe is just an attempt to have a general release that's really cheap quality to capitalize on some hype, and they're afraid that New Balance has gone the way of Nike. So we're gonna cut it in half and see, and I'll show you guys why this shoe is so strange. If you want to browse the internet freely and safely, you need to be using NordVPN. I like using NordVPN because you can switch what country you're in quotations. So it gives you access to different TV, movies, series, and even video games that aren't available in your country. And NordVPN will encrypt your data so streaming services can't slow you down while you're binge watching your favorite terrible reality TV shows like I do. And one really nice thing is NordVPN also comes with high-level malware and threat protection built in. Threat protection blocks all those intrusive ads and will automatically scan all your download files to make sure they're safe and block any malicious URLs. So you don't even have to worry about accidentally clicking into some dangerous website territory. And it also blocks trackers. So not only are your devices protected, but you're protected in the real world, so people can't find where you're at based on technical stuff that I don't understand. And for you really techie people, it has an automatic kill switch, so if the VPN access accidentally drops, your device is immediately stopped from accessing the web, and you can also use a double VPN to double up the protection and double encrypt your encryption. So if any of that sounds interesting to you, be sure to check them out via the link in my description and use the code ROSEANVIL to get your exclusive NordVPN deal. It's risk-free and has a 30-day money-back guarantee, so if you love it, you keep it. Protect yourself online. If you hate it, it's no risk and it supports the channel. So thanks again to NordVPN for sponsoring this video. And a quick history of this shoe. So this shoe was designed by the world famous Steve Smith, and originally it was a basketball shoe that was released in 1989, but it was overshadowed by a lot of the more visual tech like the Air units and the Jordans and the Reeboks, the pumps, all the other kind of gimmicky style tech that was popular at that time. This was just a very basic shoe, so it just kind of fell out of favor eventually. And then 30 years later, Teddy Santis of ALD single-handedly resurrected the 550s from the grips of death and brought it back into cultural significance with the collaborative release of their versions of the sneaker. And the interesting thing is New Balance didn't have the patterns for the shoe. They didn't have the plans for it. They somehow lost it. So they actually had to buy a pair from Japan and grab a bunch of the old sketches to recreate this shoe to as close as the original as possible, which is crazy to me. I don't know how you lose plans for a sneaker that you built. So why do people like these shoes so much? Well, they fit a niche for people who don't like Nike, who don't like the style of like the Dunks or the Air Force Ones, the Air Jordan ones. They want something a little bit different, a little more understated. For me, I think it's an interesting combination of a very retro sneaker combined with the dad shoe kind of style. And I think that's a big part of why they're so popular. And I particularly like them because they kind of remind me of like a golden era anime dad shoe. But looks aren't everything. Leather quality, at least for me, matters about as much as looks. And while these might be a really popular shoe and they look really cool, none of that tells us the quality of the shoes, and none of that tells us if this is a New Balance cash grab to capitalize on the popularity of it. But as for what we can tell about this leather, if you look at the cross section, it's pretty clearly a chrome tanned leather, and it is real leather because you can tell that by the bluing in the cross section. And it does look like it has a really heavy coating of polyurethane or plastic on top of it. So let's see how it reacts to flame. And if you didn't see the Mischief video I posted a couple days ago, that was a really good representation of what we're looking for with a heavy plastic coating and just pigment on top. The Air Force Ones had a super heavy coating on top, and it was ridiculous what it looked like when you burned it. So let's do the same flame test to this shoe, and you can see how it is just a very distinct layer that you can even just scrape off that's separate from the leather. And that's why people don't like this leather, is because it's what you're looking at isn't even the leather, it's just a plastic coating. But that doesn't always mean it's a low quality leather. What's really gonna tell us is where that lies in the cross section. So if we do a little cut and bend test, and as we get that scraped away, you can see that there is a little bit of a grain pattern on there. I made a little mistake. We all make mistakes, it's part of being human. Turns out there's not actually a grain pattern on here. It's just a really cheap suede with the plastic coating on top. I thought I saw the grain, but then when we did the macro shots, there's no grain in there, so it's even worse than I originally thought. Terrible leather. See ya. I'll be back. So at least it isn't just a cheap suede with a heavy coating on top. But this leather looks really, really thin, and it is really, really thin leather. It's only 1 millimeter thick. And most of the Nike leathers we see out there are about 1.5, and like boot leather's 2 to 3 millimeters. So it is a really, really thin leather. So honestly, not the best leather. I would say it's on par with Nike, if not worse, because of how thin it is. Now that we know there's no grain pattern, it's definitely worse than Nike's leather. Breathability was one of the aspects that they sold the shoe on in 1989, because it had these perforated leather on the side here that was supposed to let these shoes breathe a little bit more. So to test that, we hooked it up to the breathability tester, or fog machine, or Kyle's vape, to see how much air would actually come out through those holes, because I can't even tell if it's actually all the way to the inside. And as you can see, it just mostly comes out through the tongue. There's not a whole lot escaping through that perforated leather. And then as for the construction of this shoe and how this is built and all the components, and this is the really interesting thing and the thing that intrigued me the most about doing this video. And so the first thing to look at is this cup sole. So it is a cup sole, and it is sidewall stitched all the way through. You can see the stitching on the inside. But on the inside of the shoe, or like I guess that's the inside, where do you even call that? Where your 2 feet come together? I guess it's the inside of the shoe. Well, the inside of the shoe, it's more of a 3/4 cup sole, because it stops right there, and you can see the exposed foam midsole. What is the function of that? Not really anything. You know, it's more just for the look. And as for the durometer and how dense or squishy this outsole is, if we put the durometer tester on there, comes into like a 77. So right on par with what you see with most sneakers from Nike and New Balance. And then if we move to the inside of the shoe, if we pull this insole out, it's just an Ortholite insole, nothing bad, nothing good. And it does have these like little wings that kind of come up, this arch support. Does it do anything? Probably not, but whatever. But the cool thing is, if you look inside of here, that's fiberboard. And fiberboard is usually something you only see in actual real retro shoes, or you see it a lot in boots. Almost all the boots from $300 and under have a fiberboard lasting board. So that tells me that this shoe was board lasted instead of Strobel stitched, because there's no Strobel stitch in there. And so basically the way they build the shoe, I'm assuming, we'll see when we get it cut in half, is they wrap the upper all the way underneath of that lasting board, the fiber board, and then either glue it or sew it. And then the cup sole is attached to the bottom with the foam in between, and then the sidewall stitching is sewn on. So it's a really hardy and strong construction compared to the Strobel stitching construction, because on Strobel stitching, that upper stops right where it meets that lasting board or that lasting material. So it's a lot more similar to a boot style of construction. And there are pros and cons associated with it. The pros are it's super stable underfoot. You got equal pressure across the entire midsole because of how firm that fiberboard is, and it doesn't roll and it doesn't twist. It gives you a lot of lateral strength. Theoretically, you could resole this shoe because of how strong this construction is. This fiberboard is going to slowly compress to the shape of your foot and give you that custom footprint that people really like and get the extra comfort from work boots. But as for the cons, it is harder underfoot because you're directly standing on that really hard fiberboard. It's not nearly as flexible. This shoe is actually pretty stiff. And you're gonna have some break-in period to get that footprint in there and to get that fiberboard loosened up. And because of this construction, it's a little bit heavier of a shoe, especially with this chunky outsole. And fiberboard can break down over time. We've seen it in boots over and over again. So even before we cut this in half, right now, this shoe is a lot more similar to the boots that we've cut apart, and it's gonna act a lot more similar to a boot. But we don't really know for sure if all that's true because we haven't cut it in half. We don't know how thick it is. We don't know what the midsole actually is. So let's cut them in half. All right, we got it chopped in half. Let's see how much like a boot this shoe actually is. So let's see what's inside. Well, this tongue is not sewn on very well, which is kind of surprising. It's only a tiny little stitch holding this entire tongue in there. But look how thick this outsole is. That's gotta be the thickest sneaker outsole we've ever seen. And you can also see how thick this fiberboard is. You know, that fiberboard is just as thick as basically any boot that has fiberboard in it that we've seen. And you can also see how thick that foam midsole is. It's gonna give you some of that squish and allow that fiberboard to compress to give you that custom footprint. And you can also see how similar to a boot this shoe actually is. Like, I'll put some B-roll over top of comparing this to like Blundstones and some of these other boots in this $250 price range that are built almost identically to this. And you can see that the upper is fully tucked underneath of the shoe, and that would allow the shoe to be resold, which is kind of crazy for a $110 hyped sneaker. It's a really strange shoe, especially after we've cut apart so many Jordans and so many Yeezys. They're all built semi the same. This one is distinctly different. So is this shoe worth $110? Well, going into this, I didn't think it was, I thought it was gonna be kind of a negative review, to be honest, because of how bad the leather looks from the outside. But now, seeing the inside and how it's built and pulling this insole out, I think it's a pretty killer shoe for $110. Take out about 10% of the enthusiasm because I got that little bit about the leather having a grain pattern in it wrong. Bye-bye. So then to the final question of this video, is New Balance selling out by selling this shoe? Is it a quick cash grab based on the popularity of these coming back? I don't think so. I think this is definitely the worst leather we've ever seen in a New Balance, and I understand how people from the outside could see that and assume it's a terrible cash grab on New Balance's part. And if you don't care about this particular style of construction and you just want a better leather upper, I get where you're coming from, but I love these shoes. I think they're really cool. I like the construction, I like the way they look, I like everything about them, but the leather. But just imagine if New Balance actually made this a really high quality sneaker, made a leather insole, made a lot higher quality leather upper, and just made this, because they could do it, they make higher quality sneakers. So I don't know why they don't just make this a good sneaker. But let me know what you guys think. This one really surprised me, and I had a lot of fun making this video. But thank you guys so much for all your support. I'm so sweaty, and this has been a long filming week because we're putting out a lot of content. So I appreciate all your guys' support and helping us be able to afford to chop up these shoes to really show you what you're really spending your hard-earned money on. It means a lot to me and everyone at the Rose Anvil crew, so thank you guys. See ya.